I was still rolling my suitcase over the threshold when my phone buzzed with a voicemail I hadn't seen. "Your daughter is in intensive care. Please call Lakeside Memorial Hospital." The words knocked the air out of me. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been thinking about the dark chocolate I'd brought back from Paris and the soft leather gloves from Florence, small surprises for my daughter Maya. Now the apartment smelled like airport air and panic. An envelope leaned against the doorframe. Lakeside Memorial, postmarked nearly a week ago, its flap gritty with dust. My fingers shook as I called the number. "Eleanor Grant speaking. I'm returning a message about my daughter." "Mrs. Grant," the receptionist said, tone professional but kind. "Maya Collins was admitted to our ICU 6 days ago after a motor vehicle collision. She's on the 4th floor. 6 days. While I was sipping espresso on Rue Montorgueil, my only child was fighting for her life." The elevator was an iron lung swallowing time. When the doors opened, a nurse rose from her station. Her badge read Nora Wilkes. "You must be Mrs. Grant. We've been trying to reach family." "Where is her husband?" I asked. The steadiness of my voice shocking even me. "Lucas Reed should be here. He should have called me." Nora's expression barely shifted, but something in her eyes turned cautious. "Mr. Reed signed initial paperwork the night of admission. He hasn't returned, and we haven't reached him for consent forms since." The floor seemed to cant beneath my shoes. "I'd like to see my daughter." Nora led me to room 412 and paused with a warning I already dreaded. "She has extensive injuries and is ventilated. Take a breath before you go in." I didn't breathe. I pushed through. Maya lay inside a forest of machines, their screens breathing neon in the low light. A tube traced from her mouth to the ventilator. Tape pulled at the delicate skin of her cheeks. A broad white dressing covered the right side of her skull where hair had been shaved away for surgery. Purple bruises pooled over her features, the beauty I knew reshaped by trauma. Her left arm and right leg were casted. Both were elevated on pillows. The monitor kept time with my fear beep 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 while the ventilator exhaled in slow tides. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered, touching the unbandaged hand protruding from the blanket. Cold skin. I rubbed warmth into her knuckles the way I had when she was a feverish toddler. "Mom's here." Nora checked lines with that efficient gentleness good nurses have. "She's hemodynamically stable. Neurosurgery reduced intracranial pressure after admission. Numbers have trended down the last 48 hours. What happened?" My eyes didn't leave Maya's face. "The police report says her husband was driving. Estimated 90 plus in a 45 zone." Nora's voice thinned. "Mr. Reed's blood alcohol level at intake was 111. There's also indication he may have been looking at his phone. Ms. Collins wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She was partially ejected." I sat before my knees, remembered how in Lucas. Minor injuries, lacerations, and a contusion. He was discharged that night. Discharged. The word clanged around the room like dropped metal. "I need copies of everything I said," the executive cadence that had frightened more than a few junior analysts sliding back into place. "Medical records, the crash report, any contact logs regarding Mr. Reed." Nora nodded. "I'll have a packet prepared." When she left, I leaned close to Maya's ear and kept my voice level. "I am not leaving you. I'm going to find out exactly what happened." My phone hovered over Lucas's name. I typed a single line, "Lucas. I'm at Lakeside with Maya. Call me immediately. No blame, no heat. Facts first." 3 hours passed inside that steady tidal whoosh. Dr. Arjun Shah Neurosurgery came and stood where the light struck the chart in his hands. He laid out the injuries: traumatic brain injury requiring decompression, a punctured lung, a lacerated liver, multiple rib fractures, a compound femur break. Grim facts, but also cautious hope. Youth. No major comorbidities, stable pressures. When he left, I opened the folder Nora had placed at the foot of the bed. Numbers, labs, timestamps, witness notes. The police narrative made my throat burn. Radar at 93 Mapuan. Skid marks short and crooked. A phone screen lit on the console. BIAC 0.11. The line that undid me was simple. Passenger lacked seat restraint and was partially ejected through windshield. I set the paper down before my hands tore it. Where was Lucas? Why hadn't he called me? Why wasn't he sitting in this chair counting beeps, learning the names of every nurse? Answers don't arrive by themselves. They're fetched. The banker in me came awake. As a wedding gift, I'd added Maya and Lucas as authorized users on a contingency account, emergency only, I'd said. I opened my banking app. The timeline of transactions turned my blood to ice. A luxury hotel on Collins Avenue in Miami, 4 nights starting the day after the crash. A yacht charter fee. Dinners large enough to feed a small office. Boutique charges. Cash withdrawals in rapid succession totaling more than $15,000. While my daughter slept with a breathing tube, her husband went on holiday. I checked his social media out of habit, knowing he rarely posted. He didn't have to. People like Lucas were always tagged. Within minutes, I found him on a friend's feed at Trentwolf Loch, grinning on the stern of a white yacht called Midnight Sun, an arm slung around a woman in a sequined bikini who was not my daughter. Miami skyline at Blue Hour, champagne flutes lifted the caption, 3 days deep, boys, no breaks. There are two kinds of rage, the kind that sets a fire and the kind that sharpens a blade. I chose the blade. I called Ethan Park, my private banker. He answered on the second ring. Eleanor, welcome home. Ethan, we enact emergency protocols now. Freeze every account and card Lucas Reed can touch authorized user joint access anything with his name. His voice trimmed itself. Understood. Is Maya in ICU? He was driving drunk. He left and he's in Miami spending her money. Keys tapped in the background like rain. Freeze now, I said. And notify me of every decline attempt, every call he makes. Also pull a complete history of his activity since the wedding. I want transfers, cash vendors, everything. Give me 10 minutes for the lock and 90 for the audit, he said softly. And Eleanor, I'm sorry. I ended the call, saved the photos and videos from Trent's feed, and emailed them to myself, and after a breath to the address listed on the crash report for Officer Ana Delgado Traffic Investigations. Subject, location, and evidence regarding Lucas Reed. Body, date, time, yacht name visible, marina landmarks, the credit card timeline. Attachments organized, file names clean. If grief is chaos, documentation is a rope. My phone lit up. Security alert decline, attempted ATM withdrawal. Miami First National. A second ping decline, restaurant charge. A third customer service call, card holder agitated alleging identity theft. Protocol held. Good. Then the screen flashed Lucas. I let it ring once before I answered. Eleanor Grant. What did you do? His voice slurred at the edge's music somewhere behind him. My cards are getting declined, all of them. Are they? I said mildly. How inconvenient. You can't just... I'm sitting next to your wife, I said each word placed precisely. A ventilator is breathing for her. Are you familiar with how ventilators work, Lucas? Silence, then a rustle, like a door closing. I needed space after the accident, he said, dropping into a confidential register. Trauma does things to people. This trip isn't what it looks like. It looks like you rented a yacht called Midnight Sun and found someone to match its name, I said. It looks like you withdrew $15,000 in cash. It looks like you left the hospital while my daughter was being intubated. You're being unfair, he said, and the reasonable mask was back quick as a coin trick. Eleanor, we're family. Cut off access, and how am I supposed to pay for her care for travel to get back? Unfreeze one card and I'll be on the next flight. They're not our accounts, I said. They're mine. I extended access for emergencies. That privilege is revoked. You can't revoke what's legally mine, he snapped, temper flaring through the silk. What's Maya's is mine. It's called marriage. There it was, the part people like him always tried to hide until pressure peeled it free. You should also know, I said calmly, that Officer Delgado wants to speak with you. There's the matter of driving under the influence and reckless endangerment. Possibly texting while driving. She'll be delighted to hear from you. A hiss of breath, then a harder voice. You have no idea who you're up against. On the contrary, I said and ended the call. I set the phone face down beside the bed and stroked Maya's hair back from the white edge of the dressing. Your husband doesn't like losing, I whispered. He's about to learn how losing feels. Nora came in with new fluids and a word I clung to, stable. I asked her to note on the chart, no contact for Lucas Reed. Alert security if he calls or appears. She nodded with a look that said she'd seen too many ICU rooms where the worst injury was not visible on a scan. My inbox chimed, audit preliminary. Ethan's spreadsheet laid out a pattern I didn't want, but had expected the early tests, the escalation to bigger charges, the split checks at restaurants designed to slide under radar, small transfers to accounts with neat, forgettable names. The last 6 days spiked like a heartbeat in fibrillation. Another ping decline yacht charter final payment. I pictured Lucas jaw tight, trying card after card before the math of consequences balanced itself in his head. Trent posted a short video minutes later, Lucas in a cabin shouting into a phone the caption, some brittle joke about champagne problems. I saved it, tagged time, and source filed it beneath a folder labeled Crash Week Evidence. I typed a brief update to Officer Delgado with the marina location and a screenshot of the yacht's transom. Then I exhaled deliberate long, like matching the ventilator's rise and fall. Phase 1 was done. Access cut. Evidence gathered. Law enforcement notified. My daughter's hand lay in mine, light but present. Outside the window, Chicago's evening bent toward blue. Machines kept time. I leaned forward so my words would find the ear I hoped was listening. We started May, I said. Tomorrow we keep going. And I didn't yet know how far going would demand I travel. Night in the ICU is a country with its own weather. Lights dim, voices soften. Machines keep a kind of moonlit tide. I sat in the vinyl recliner beside Maya's bed, my coat folded under my head, like a day-old pillow, watching the green numerals hold steady. Every few minutes, my phone pulsed with another notification, each one a small stone laid on the path out of confusion. Security alert, decline, ATM. Miami First National. Security alert, decline, the jewel room. $142. Customer service, extended call card. Holder agitated. Good, let him feel friction. Officer Ana Delgado called just after midnight. Ms. Grant, thank you for the package. We shared your screenshots with Miami-Dade. Harbor Patrol has eyes on the marina where Midnight Sun launched earlier today. I need a formal statement when you can step away, but for now, keep documenting. I will, I said. An officer, please flag his passport. He's the sort who mistakes running for strategy. I already submitted the request, she said. One more thing, we obtained the dash cam from a squad car that passed the crash site within a minute. It captured the impact sound and a blurred profile of a white coupe. The speed estimate in the report looks solid. Nora appeared at the doorway with a warm blanket and a look that asked a question she didn't voice. Numbers are holding, she murmured after the call ended. Dr. Shaw will reevaluate sedation in the morning. If pressures keep trending, we may begin to lighten. The word felt like a window cracked open in stale air. I opened Ethan's preliminary audit. The pattern was textbook grifter, small deniable withdrawals, splits at restaurants designed to dodge card fraud algorithms, then the post-crash spike hotel yacht designer boutique's cash. 2 account numbers popped up again and again as transfer destinations, each masked behind bland bank-generated descriptors. I texted Ethan, trace account ending 6714 and 2339, owner names, banks, jurisdictions. On it, he replied. Then another thought surfaced, vague at first, then crystalline. I opened my contacts and scrolled to Lydia Chen, an insurance broker I'd worked with on corporate risk policies back when I still wore ambition like armor. She picked up on the second ring. Ellie, it's midnight. I need you to check if a policy exists on my daughter's life written in the last year. If you can't access it, tell me which databases I can subpoena. Her voice sharpened. Give me her full name and date of birth, I told her. Call me at 8, she said. If there's a policy, I'll have the binder. When the floor went quiet again, I angled the recliner toward Maya and took her hand. They may lighten the sedatives in the morning, I whispered. If you feel me squeeze. Nothing moved but the beeps. At dawn, the ICU shifted gears, lights up carts, rattling day staff replacing night. Dr. Shaw arrived with a resident and a tablet. He shone a penlight in Maya's pupils. He watched, waited. Pressure trending down, he said finally. We'll begin a sedation holiday, gradually reducing. Don't expect immediate responsiveness. The brain wakes the way dawn does. Tell me what to watch for. Spontaneous movement. Eye-opening. Changes in breathing that aren't ventilator-driven. Press the call button for anything new. When they left, I checked my phone. 2 new messages from Ethan. 6714. J. Sandoval, Bayfront, Credit. Tampa FL Aesthetics Wellness Business. 2039, The Style Vault. LLC Nashville, TN Personal Styling. 2 separate women. I felt that peculiar chill, the one that comes not from cold, but from recognizing a pattern you hoped belonged to fiction. I typed, pull frequency and amount since wedding. Also search for additional beneficiaries that look like businesses but 0 employees. The next ping wasn't Ethan, it was Lydia. Binder found. A PDF bloomed on my screen. Policyholder Maya Collins. Insured same. Owner Lucas A. Reed. Face amount $500, $1,000. Riders, accidental death and dismemberment, double indemnity. Issue date 2 months post-wedding. My stomach went cold. I forwarded the file to Officer Delgado with the subject New Evidence Policy and Riders. Her reply came fast. Received. Will loop financial crimes. Don't assume intent yet, but the optics matter. Optics. Such a tidy word for a possibility that made my skin crawl. At 9:12 a.m., my phone vibrated again. Ethan, 3rd destination uncovered, he said when I answered. Phoenix Desert Dawn, Yoga Collective receiving monthly transfers labeled studio membership far in excess of any membership. How many women, I asked. At least 3. Might be more if he uses cash. And the totals. Since the wedding, $48,000 across all 3. Post-crash, $12,000 in 6 days. I thanked him and hung up. The spinning sensation in my chest wasn't fear now. It was velocity. The story inside the numbers had a voice, and I could finally hear its grammar. Lucas texted at 9:28. I'm coming back to Chicago. Unfreeze 1 card so I can book. For Maya's sake. I didn't answer. 30 minutes later, Ethan called again. He's not coming to Chicago, he said flatly. Attempted purchase one way to Cancun on a card labeled in Maya's name. We blocked it, and I flagged airline fraud security. So he's trying to run, I said. He's trying to escape gravity. I forwarded the attempted purchase to Delgado. He'll pivot to ground transport, she replied. Miami-Dade will alert bus terminals and car rentals. We're also liaising with Coast Guard private charters. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered because by then I answered everything. Ms. Grant, a woman said, voice careful as if testing ice. You don't know me. My name is Marissa Vale. 2 years ago, he was Jason Red to me. I saw a video last night of a man melting down on a yacht. Someone tagged your son-in-law. I recognized him. My grip tightened on the phone. Tell me. He took out a small life policy on me, she said. Said it was responsible adulting. 3 weeks later, we had a crash. He walked away. I didn't. He emptied my savings while I was in rehab and vanished. The police said unlucky coincidence. I couldn't make them see what he was. Would you talk to a detective, I asked. Gladly, she said, a tremor of heat under the word. I wrote everything down back then because no one believed me. Dates, amounts, the body shop he used, the name on the burner phone he carried. I passed her to Delgado within the hour. When I hung up, the room felt different, not lighter exactly, but aligned, like the furniture had been pushed where it belonged. Nora came to adjust a drip. We're reducing by another notch, she said. This is the slowest race in the world, Ms. Grant. Slow is fine, I said. Slow keeps her here. The ventilator's bellows softened. For the first time since I'd entered room 412, I could hear something else, Maya's own breath trying to find its rhythm beneath the machines. I took her hand and leaned near. Maya, I whispered, it's Mom. Can you squeeze? A long minute ticked by. Then barely pressure, as faint as a moth against a window. Nora, my voice sounded like someone else's. She squeezed. The nurse was at the bedside in a breath, calling out the change to the unit. Dr. Shah's resident arrived with the calm that gets trained into you when panic helps nothing. Positive sign, she said. We'll give her a little time and consider a spontaneous breathing trial this afternoon if everything holds. I texted Lydia. We'll need sworn affidavits from your files. I texted Ethan. Keep monitoring. If he calls pretending identity theft, record everything you can. I texted Delgado. Maya responded to command. Thank you for everything you're doing. Delgado replied with something that surprised me. I have a daughter, 15. None of this is procedural right now. It's personal, appropriately so. By noon, Miami-Dade Harbor Patrol had visited the marina. Lucas wasn't aboard. The charter company filed a theft of services complaint after the declined final payment. Video surfaced of a man matching Lucas's description leaving the dock in the early pre-dawn ball cap, low jaw, tight and angle. You'd have to know to look for, to recognize. Trent, the same friend who'd posted the champagne grin, uploaded one more story, a door slamming, muffled cursing, the kind of shaky footage people create when they know something is about to become content. I saved it labeled dated. Ready to try? Nora asked, in the afternoon eyes on the monitor. Dr. Shah stood at the foot of the bed. The respiratory therapist adjusted settings and watched the screen. We'll let her initiate breaths, he said. If she sustains, we can discuss extubation within 24 hours. The machines exhaled. Then Maya did too. Not the machine. Her. Small, stubborn, imperfect, but hers. We stayed there listening to the most beautiful draft of air I'd ever heard. The rest of the day became a dance of increments: reduce a medication, assess a reflex, wait and watch. In the white space between those movements, a different choreography played out on my phone. Miami-Dade canvassed marinas down the coast. The Coast Guard distributed a bulletin. Airline security flagged his name system-wide. Ethan's team caught Lucas trying to leverage a forgotten store card at a luxury boutique, and then oddly a payday lending app that spat him out on identity verification. At 6, Officer Delgado arrived in person. She wore the look of someone who has driven fast and thought faster. I had a meeting at the state's attorney's office, she said, pulling up a chair. Financial crimes is opening a file. Your banker's audit is gold. We'll need him to swear to chain of custody. Miami-Dade issued a warrant on the theft of services. If they pick him up first, we'll place a detainer and seek extradition. What about the crash, I asked. Blood, alcohol, speed, possible distraction. That's reckless endangerment, at least, she said. With the life insurance and witness pattern, the state's attorney wants to look at attempted murder. But I need to temper expectations. Intent is hard to prove without a confession or smoking gun text. I understand, I said. My goal is simple: keep him from hurting anyone again. Delgado looked at Maya, then back at me. That goal is already doing work. She left just as the night nurse came on. We were back under the geography of low light and steady beeps. Nora tucked another blanket around Maya's shoulders. Talk to her, she said softly. We tell families this because it's true. Patients often remember voices. So I talked. About foolish little things, at first the grocery list I'd abandoned, the fact that the cat sitter said our calico had tolerated the vacuum. At last, how many pigeons were on the hospital roof at noon. And then about bigger things, about how Officer Delgado had a daughter, and therefore a stake. About how Ethan had already built a binder thicker than any prospectus I'd ever bullied through a boardroom. About how her breath had defeated the machine for 6 consecutive minutes. At some point past midnight, I must have dozed. A sound pulled me awake, not loud, but not machine-generated either. I sat up. Her eyelashes fluttered, then parted. Not all the way, not clarity, but open. "Maya," I said, and the word broke me in a way the hard ones hadn't. "Hi, love." Her lips moved. The tube still filled her mouth. The sound was an exhale shaped like language. I pressed the call button, and Nora was there, the respiratory therapist. A moment later, Dr. Shaw streaming in with a barely leashed smile. They adjusted, evaluated, measured. "Tomorrow morning," he said finally, "if the numbers hold, we'll remove the ventilator." My phone vibrated on the tray. A text from Delgado picked up in Key West, attempting to hire private boat to the Bahamas. Held on theft of services. We've placed a detainer. More in the morning. I stared at the words until they made sense. Key West. Bahamas. He'd run out of land and tried to barter the sea. I leaned close to Maya so only she could hear. "They found him," I said. "He won't get to decide the terms anymore." She blinked slow and deliberate, and for a heartbeat I let myself believe it meant she understood. The morning came as promised, bright and unbearable. The respiratory therapist checked settings, Dr. Shaw verified reflexes, and Nora nodded like someone watching a tide line roll backward at last. "Okay, Maya," the therapist said. Voice the kind that is all steel under velvet. "We're going to take the tube out. When I say breathe, breathe." I held her hand and counted with the monitor. On 3, they slid the tube. She coughed, gagged, blinked tears, then dragged an air of her own and held it like a prize. Oxygen via nasal cannula replaced the machine's umbilical. The room felt enormous. Her voice when it came was hardly more than a scratch on stone. "Mom." One word wrecked and perfect. "I'm here," I said, because that was the only true sentence in the universe. She tried again. Axie A wince, then the rest. "Accident." "Yes," I said, fighting the urge to spill everything I'd learned in 36 hours. "The car crashed." "You don't have to remember now. You just have to breathe." She closed her eyes, a small line between her brows, the kind she'd had as a child, when a dream confused her and morning had to re-explain the world. Nora increased the humidification on the oxygen and adjusted the bed so Maya could rest without straining. I stepped into the hallway to call Delgado, Ethan, and Lydia, in that order: facts for the first, gratitude for the second, logistics for the third. When I turned back, Maya was dozing, the cannula soft against her cheek. I opened my notebook, and wrote a list with boxes to check. Statement, subpoenas, affidavits, marina footage, airline flag, Coast Guard memo. The act of writing wasn't busy work, it was the framework on which we would hang the day. Before I put the pen down, I added one more box. Tell her the truth carefully. That task didn't belong to a detective or a banker or an attorney. It belonged to me. I looked at my daughter and felt a heat I hadn't let myself feel since I'd walked into room 412, hope, reckless and loud. We had air, we had a beginning again. Outside, morning flooded the ICU's frosted windows. Inside, I counted the beeps in groups of 10 and waited for the next right move. By late morning, the room felt twice its size without the ventilator's bulk and hiss. Maya dozed, lips dry from oxygen breaths, her own ragged at the edges, but hers. Dr. Shaw signed his notes with the tidy penmanship of a man who has seen chaos and refuses to add to it. "She'll be tired," he said. "Fatigue after extubation is normal. We'll start with low-dose pain control, respiratory therapy, and short cognitive checks this afternoon. The path is long, Ms. Grant, but this is the right first step." After he left, I sat beside Maya and tried to weigh a truth against a body that had just learned to breathe again. Telling everything now would be like handing a marathoner a backpack at mile 1. Still silence has its own gravity. Her eyes opened, the brown of them clouded but intent. "How long?" she whispered. 2 weeks since the crash. I came back 6 days after it happened. I kept my tone even. "You're safe. I'm here." She nodded, the motion small and careful. A line deepened between her brows, an old imprint from childhood when math homework went sideways. "Lucas, he isn't here," I said, letting the words settle before adding, "and he won't be." Confusion, then a flicker of something like warning. "Why?" "Because you need to heal," I said. "And because he needs to answer for a number of things." I reached for water, wet her lips with a sponge. "One piece at a time, May." We didn't get another piece that hour. She drifted, the kind of sleep that doesn't travel far beneath the skin, but is still sleep. While she rested, my phone hummed with a text from Officer Delgado, detained in Key West. Theft of services holds. Chicago detainer lodged. Interview pending. My reply was 2 words, thank you. By late afternoon, the respiratory therapist had Maya blowing into a plastic device that turned breath into a column of floating balls. Think of them as balloons at a birthday party, he said gently. We're going to keep them in the air. A few minutes later, the speech therapist arrived to test swallow function with a spoon, a sip, a cup. Tiny triumphs marked like notches on a door frame. When evening settled, Delgado stepped into room 412 in a gray blazer that had seen a long day. She took in the oxygen cannula, the alertness in Maya's gaze, the measured way she turned her head. Ms. Collins, she said, warmth underneath the official. I'm Officer Delgado. I've spoken with your mother. Maya tried to sit a bit taller. Hi, she managed. I'm relieved to meet you awake, Delgado said. To me, we have him. He tried to hire a private boat for the Bahamas. The captain recognized him from that yacht video. He's in custody in Florida. We've asked for him to be held until Miami-Dade processes their charge. Then we'll bring him here on our detainer. Maya's eyes sharpened. He ran. Yes, I said. I kept my cadence steady like a metronome set to calm. And he used your card to try to buy a one-way ticket to Cancun. The bank blocked it. Delgado glanced between us. Ms. Collins, when you're stronger, there's an option I want you to consider. A controlled confrontation at the station recorded with your consent. Sometimes hearing a victim's voice, seeing the harm, cuts through a suspect's performance. There's no pressure. It's your choice on your timeline. Maya's fingers found the blanket's edge and smoothed it, an old nervous habit. Not today, she said. But maybe. Maybe is perfect, Delgado said. Maybe means you get to choose. 2 days later, after a CT scan that made Dr. Shaw allow himself the smallest smile, and after Maya completed a breath-by-breath climb from 6 to 10 minutes on the incentive spirometer, the choice became yes. She told me in the measured tone of someone climbing a hill and counting the steps. I want to see him once, she said. I want to say my piece while the tape is rolling. The next morning, a hospital transport aide wheeled Maya to a small conference room off the ICU. Delgado was already there with an assistant state's attorney, Sophia Rangel, and a camera on a tripod. The fluorescent lights hummed. A pitcher of water sweated on the table. Maya wore a soft cardigan over the pale blue gown and insisted the chair be positioned so her casts were visible. No theatrics, just fact. They brought Lucas in, cuffed 2 officers at his shoulders. Jail had reduced him, sleep-starved eyes, jaw tight, the scruff of a beard that had outlived charm. For a fraction of a second, surprise crossed his face at the sight of Maya upright and alert. Then he reassembled. Maya, he said, voice tuned to remorse. Thank God. I've been trying to... No, Maya said very quietly. The single syllable held more authority than any paragraph I could have crafted. You will listen. Delgado read the boilerplate about recording consent and counsel availability. Lucas said he wanted to speak as a husband, which told me his lawyer had either cautioned him and been ignored, or hadn't yet arrived. The camera's red light glowed. Maya began the way Dr. Shaw had taught her, to face a steep task with breath and a plan. On the night of the crash, she said, each word precise. I told you to slow down. You were checking your phone. We were arguing because you wanted me to liquidate investments for your Miami opportunity. I refused. She swallowed. I remember reaching for my seatbelt. I don't remember what came after that until the ventilator. Lucas lifted his hands as far as the cuffs allowed. It was a blur. I panicked. Seeing you hurt? Stop. Maya's voice didn't rise, but it didn't have to. You left. You signed one paper and disappeared. You took my emergency access card and flew to Miami. You rented a yacht. You put your arm around a woman in a silver bikini and smiled for a camera. You spent $15,000 in cash and thousands more in restaurants and boutiques while I was asleep with a tube in my throat. Then you tried to leave the country. This is not what panic looks like. This is what entitlement looks like. Color climbed his neck. Who filled your head? I read the bank records, she said. I saw the policy you took out on my life 2 months after our wedding. I saw the monthly transfers to Jay Sandoval in Tampa, the Style Vault LLC in Nashville, and Desert Dawn Yoga in Phoenix. I heard from Marissa Vale, or did you know her as someone else? She has documents, Lucas. Names, dates, phone numbers. The pattern is not subtle. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Not fear contempt. Those are business contacts, he said, forcing the charm back through clenched teeth. Networking. You don't understand how deals are made. I understand how deals are paid for, Maya said. With other people's money. Rangel leaned forward, voice crisp. Mr. Reed, this isn't an arraignment. You are not compelled to answer, but I advise you to listen carefully to your wife. Ex-wife, Maya said, and the words steadied her shoulders. As soon as I can sign. He laughed, the sound edged and small. Without me, you are nothing. Delgado clicked her pen and didn't write a thing. The camera's red dot blinked indifferent and exact. Maya's reply was so soft I almost missed it. Without you, I am safe. That ended it. Delgado signaled the officers who moved him to the door. Lucas turned once the old posture snapping back on reflex. You'll regret this, he said to me. Not to her, because that's where his brain lives, where decisions and money sit. I have rights. You had responsibilities, I said. You ignored them. After they took him, Rangel capped her pen. He just bought us an extra 2 years with that without me line, she said. It won't carry the case, but jurors understand contempt better than spreadsheets. Maya went quiet in the elevator, a stiffness replacing adrenaline. Back in room 412, she slept with the boneless exhaustion of a runner after a final bell. When she woke, her eyes were clearer than they had been all week. I thought I'd feel worse after seeing him, she said, but I don't. It's like walking out of a room and realizing the noise was a refrigerator hum you'd lived with so long you forgot it wasn't normal. 3 weeks moved like a tide forward, then pause, then forward again. Physical therapy, edge of bed to chair to 2 steps, 2 to 5, 5 to the window and back. Occupational therapy buttons, forks a pen that felt heavy at first, and then less so. Neuropsychology with Dr. Naomi Barrett, who framed memory not as a single bulb flicking on, but as a string of lights you test and replace. Recovery isn't linear, Dr. Barrett said to both of us. You measure it in inches and the courage to collect them. The day we wheeled out under a sky that smelled like thawing pavement and laundry steam, Maya cried and then laughed at herself for crying. I cried and didn't apologize. Home became a clinic addressed like a house. The dining room traded its table for parallel bars. Elastic bands looped from door hinges. A whiteboard listed meds appointments, nonsense words for speech drills. The guest suite on the first floor became hers light through the sheer curtains, fern on the sill, a bell she never used because she preferred to call my name. At the end of the first week home, Delgado and Rangel visited with a folder thick enough to bruise. Here are the charges on our side, Rangel said. DUI, reckless endangerment, identity theft for the card, in Ms. Collins's name, and financial exploitation of a spouse. Miami-Dade will proceed on theft of services. We are evaluating attempted murder, but we have to be honest about evidentiary thresholds. Translation, Delgado said gently. It's hard to prove intent to kill absent a confession, a text, or a cooperating witness who heard him plan it. The life policy with double indemnity, the grift pattern, the previous fiancé, these are powerful context. They may carry weight in sentencing, and they strengthen our bargaining position. What does bargaining look like, I asked. Plea, Rangel said. We push for a global deal across jurisdictions guilty to the financial counts and reckless endangerment with a sentencing cap of 10 to 12 years and full restitution. We reserve the right to present the policy and pattern as aggravators at sentencing. If we go to trial on attempted murder and a jury isn't convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, he could shave years off the total exposure. Maya listened with that new steadiness she'd earned bead by bead. If we accept a plea, she asked, what do I have to do? Submit a victim impact statement, Rangel said. You can read it aloud at sentencing if you choose. Or not. Your call. And if we go to trial, you relive it, Delgado said softly. All of it. Cross-examination, defense theories, delays, appeals. There is no wrong answer. There is only the one you can live with. That night, while I chopped carrots and Maya clacked through a set of ankle raises in the recliner, we did what we had done for years, lay out options on the table and salt them with what mattered. I know what I want, she said finally. Not revenge, not headlines, just a decade where he can't touch anyone else. That sounds like an answer, I said. She nodded. Let's take the deal if they put restitution in ink, and a no-contact order that doesn't expire with parole. Rangel called 2 days later with terms that looked like the ones we'd outlined on a paper towel, guilty to financial exploitation, identity theft, and reckless endangerment, dismissal of attempted murder in exchange for stipulated facts at sentencing, 10 years with eligibility after 8, full restitution, registration as a financial offender on release, lifetime protective order. It's not everything she said, but it's not nothing. It's enough, Maya said, and it was her voice that mattered. We signed where the tabs told us to sign. The court set a sentencing date 8 weeks out. Delgado texted me quietly afterward. You did the brave, boring thing. Brave and boring saves lives. The brave, boring thing continued. Ethan's team clawed back funds where the law allowed negotiated restitution schedules where it didn't. The house, the one Lucas had insisted on moving fully into his name, but had never bothered to complete the paperwork for, remained solely Maya's, because I had been uncooperative about streamlining. She told me I had been right, and I told her I had been lucky. On a Tuesday morning that smelled like coffee and rubbing alcohol, Dr. Barrett asked Maya what she missed most. making Maya said without thinking, the act of turning a mess into shape. Then let's make Barrett said and prescribed art not as therapy, but as a job. I cleared the sunroom. We set up a canvas and cheap acrylics because cheap meant fear could fail without cost. The first day, Maya pressed color into the linen like a child learning a new alphabet. By the third day, she was composing. The fourth, she titled a small piece Fault Line. I had to step out and cry in the kitchen where the knives were. We began to speak publicly, one small room at a time, because stories are instructions people don't know they're learning. I spoke as a mother who had thought strength meant handling things quietly. Maya spoke as a woman who had mistaken control for care. Afterward, women found us in hallways and bathrooms and parking lots, their voices low and precise. Me too. Me too. Here's what he said. Here's what he took. Here's what I'm taking back. A month before sentencing, Rangel visited again with a draft of the victim impact statement. Edit, she said. Make it sound like you. Maya crossed out the legal verbs and replaced them with true ones. You endangered. You abandoned. You spent. You lied. Then she added a sentence that didn't fit any form. I am not your cautionary tale. I am my own beginning. The day we practiced the statement aloud, she made it through the first paragraph and then stopped. I don't want to spend the sentencing listening to his lawyer explain away my life, she said. I want to spend it in physical therapy, adding 2 steps to the parallel bars. Then that's your sentence for that day, I said. 2 more steps. We sent the statement to Rangel with a note, we won't attend. Please read on her behalf. On a rain-bright afternoon in early spring, a letter arrived from Ethan's Bank Foundation grant paperwork enclosed. He'd spoken to his board. They wanted to help fund Maya's idea, a resource hub for survivors of financial abuse and coercive control. We named it the Ledger Project because books should balance and because words matter. Maya's canvases grew in scale and confidence. She mixed grit into gesso, scraping light out of roughness. Lines fractured and then found each other. She taped a list above her easel. Count the beeps and tens when panic comes. Drink water. Make a shape, not a point. Call mom if a thought hurts. Turn on music, louder. One morning she rolled blue over black and gold over blue and stood back with the tilt of the head I had watched since kindergarten. I think this one's called Awakening, she said. It's not subtle, but neither am I anymore. When the sentencing date finally landed on the calendar, I did not circle it. We knew what we had chosen. We didn't need a countdown to validate it. The night before we ate pasta at the small table we'd reclaimed from the physical therapy gear, Maya fell asleep early. I sat in the quiet house and realized that silence had changed its meaning. It no longer sounded like fear. The morning of Rangel texted a photo of the courtroom, empty benches, wood polished by decades of stories. I've got this, she wrote. You take your steps. We did. 2 more along the bars, then 3. Maya's breath hitched and then settled. When we finished, we sat on the floor backs against the wall and stared at the ceiling fan like teenagers. My phone buzzed on the mat between us. 10 years with eligibility after 8. Restitution ordered in full. Protective order granted. Registration required on release. Rangel followed with, I read your words. The judge read them again. Maya nodded once, the kind of nod that holds both relief and grief without apology. Good, she said. Then, after a moment. Next. Lunch, I said, because next is made of small things. Then you have an hour with the canvas. She laughed freer than I'd heard since before Paris and pushed herself to standing with her hands on the bars. Deal. I washed plates. She pulled tape from the edges of a new canvas and drew a chalk line that refused to be straight and decided not to correct it. Outside, the rain had rinsed the sky to that rare clean you get only after a storm. Inside, the house felt like a ship turned toward open water. On my desk, a stack of envelopes weighted nonprofit paperwork for the Ledger Project, a prospectus from a gallery director who'd seen a small post of Fault Line on a community site and asked for a studio visit, a note from a women's shelter wondering if we might speak next month. None of this undid what had been done. All of it made next honest. I went back to the sunroom and stood in the doorway. Maya had begun brush-steady arms sure enough to translate will into line. The painting wasn't about what we had survived. It was about what shape survival takes when it stops needing to justify itself to anyone. We're not done, she said without turning, as if reading the calculus in my chest. No, I said. We've only laid the underpainting. She smiled at the canvas. Then let's make the next layer sing. 1 year to the week after the crash, the gallery smelled like new paint and citrus polish. People moved in soft currents between canvases, their reflections splitting and joining in the glass. Maya stood near the largest piece, a cane at her side, more ornament than anchor now. A slim nasal scar catching the light and refusing to apologize for existing. The title card read, Awakening. The composition carries its own scaffolding, the curator said to a cluster of listeners. You see the fracture, but you feel the structure. Maya nodded, fielding questions with the patience that physical therapy had taught her breath by breath. A red dot bloomed beside fault line, then another beside shoreline after. I watched her sign a receipt, watched her steady her weight evenly the way Dr. Shaw had taught her, watched her accept praise without translating it into debt. That last part was new. Officer Delgado slipped in from the back, out of uniform hair, loose eyes scanning until they found us. She hugged Maya like someone who understands beginnings and endings and the work that lives between them. Ethan arrived next, suit crisp, face soft. He handed Maya an envelope, a foundation gift from his bank to the Ledger Project, now a registered nonprofit with a website that loaded quickly and a hotline that didn't. You turned spreadsheets into lifelines, I told him. You turned evidence into air, he said back. When the small speeches came, Maya kept hers short. People tell me this show is about survival, she said, voice calm and clear. It is. But it's also about systems, how a life can be kept breathing by machines, and then by a mother who knows how to freeze an account faster than fear can spend it. It's about nurses who taught me to count breaths in sets of 10 detectives who returned the word choice to me, and friends who stood between me and the old gravity. Thank you for helping me look forward without pretending there isn't a past. After the applause thinned, a woman about 60 approached, gripping a program like a passport. She spoke low, precise, the way you do when each syllable costs. I left last week, she said. My name on the mortgage again, I didn't think I could. Your story made a map. Maya took her hand. You drew it, she said. The next morning we went back to the hospital, not to room 412, because someone else was living there now, but to the ICU desk with a tin of almond cookies and a card. Nora wasn't on shift, but her name was on the board, so we wrote a note anyway. Thank you for teaching us to hear hope under the hiss, M&E. In the corridor, Maya stopped, palm on the wall, where our shadows had once been small and frantic. I used to think this hallway was where everything ended, she said. And now, it's where my breath started belonging to me again. Outside Chicago had finally remembered spring. We walked slow because slow had kept her here. At the curb, she hooked her arm through mine in a gesture so ordinary it made my throat ache. News from the legal system arrived in quarterly pulses, appeal denied. Restitution on schedule, protective order verified. Lucas's early parole eligibility would begin in 8 years, but the registration requirements and no-contact order would outlive that clock, and the ledger he'd kept quiet accounts. Burner phones neat, little lies had become a public record that would follow him into every application and under every alias. I did not visit him. There are victories that look like speeches and victories that look like not showing up. Maya and I traveled once the cane felt like a choice. We did Paris right, late breakfast, long museum lines, coffee that taught patience. In Florence, we bought cheap pencils, not leather, and drew on the Arno embankment, the paper buckling where the river damp rose. In Venice, we didn't take a gondola because walking on our own timetable felt like wealth. The Ledger Project grew the way useful things do, quietly and then all at once. We hired a staffer to field hotline calls then too. We built checklists that read like kindness, call the bank, freeze access, photograph everything, save texts, find a safe browser. We spoke where we were asked to speak, libraries, shelters, conferences that served bad coffee and good purpose. We learned a phrase and used it until it felt like a lever, coercive control. We taught people who did not think of themselves as victims to think of themselves as customers who could fire a service they hadn't realized they'd hired. A year and a half after sentencing, we stood on the courthouse steps to support another woman whose story sounded too familiar. Cameras swung, microphones bloomed. When the reporters turned to Maya, she kept it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.